I don't know how else to say this, but I've been hiding something from you guys. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Fallout. Arsenal cracks? Possibly. Is this the start of a slippery slope for Arsenal? I know I can hear you screaming at me right now. Not you, Jim. Not you, man. Well, look, you lost to Everton. We're going to dive into that and all of the big games from Saturday in particular. If you want to check out my match reaction from the Spurs-Man City game, that is on the channel as well. But we're going to have a look at who had an instant impact, of course, as well from that January transfer window, because the January transfer window, it has had a huge impact on the state of affairs in the Premier League. And in this episode of The Fallout, we're going to have a look at who came out on top and who have let this season slip in game week 22. Everton 1, Arsenal 0. The XG was 1.77 to Everton, 0.86 to Arsenal. Wow. I guess the question is, and let us know how you're feeling about this, Arsenal fans, because I think it's one of those where generally you'll go, well, look, we haven't lost many games this season, so let's just keep calm. I think it's disappointing, but at the same time, it did feel like, when you start watching that game, you just go, they could easily lose this. And like any other week of the season, you just wouldn't have seen that. You wouldn't have felt that, but you really did. It did remind me of that first game for Duncan Ferguson when I think they might have been, is it Chelsea they beat? They beat someone, but it was the same thing where they just worked their socks off. But Sean Dyche did brilliantly. You got Dyched. I tweeted it, you just got Dyched. And it was true. A few of you blocked me. That's your call. Do you know what I mean? But it happened, and it was really impressive. This was the first time that Sean Dyche had led a team to beat a team that's top of the league. And also, it's only the second time that he's ever beaten Arsenal. But with the way that Everton played, you would have thought that he'd done this numerous times, because the plan and the execution was perfect. So good. We did a video on Sean Dyche, and it was to the letter exactly what happened and transpired in this game. That protection of the V, so much organisation. And this is really impressive because Dyche has only had a few days to work with these players and form them into what he wants. And despite this, the tactical approach and the way that Everton went about their business, it was spot on. The crowd obviously helped as well. Getting through that first 10-15 minutes was really important as well. But Everton deserved it. You see that from the XG as well. And from the average positions, that's the one thing that's a bit murky here, because it's hard to see what the formation was. But that's down to the fact that McNeil and Iwobi, they swapped wings around the 20th minute. Before that, they were the other way around. It wasn't really working. Everton's formation, it resembled a 4-5-1 out of possession, which morphed into a 4-4-1-1 when going forward. And that was Onana playing pretty high up the pitch at the time when they had the ball and utilising his size and technical ability magnificently. You also had Decore in this side as well. And this is something I've been screaming for. Utilise the size in this squad. It's a big squad physically. And when you're bigger than the opposition, you don't have to be better in some ways. You just have to be a bit smarter and well organised. And Onana put up the output of 2 players against Arsenal. He was fantastic. Out of possession, he was dominant, making 4 tackles and a further 2 interceptions. That's 6 in total, and tackles and interceptions. That's a huge number. And going forward, he also created 1 big chance, as well as being really press resistant for the team as well. And at one part of the game, he made a sort of Marseille roulette backheel turn type thing, which it allowed Everton to bypass the Arsenal press and to buy themselves some time. He did so much for Everton in that 90 minutes and thoroughly deserved his Man of the Match award. And when it comes to the team and how they exposed Arsenal, it was vastly down to corner kicks, really, from an offensive point of view, or getting crosses in the box as well. Decore had a great chance in the first half, as did Dominic Calvert-Lewin. He had 2 great chances, actually, but one from a Seamus Coleman cross. And Everton had a total of 7 corners against Arsenal, and it felt like there was a real threat in every single one. What allows you to be optimistic as an Everton fan, and again, why I think Sean Dyche was the right choice here over Bielsa, was that you felt that Everton had a persistent threat every time they had a corner, and they had different corner strategies, and they were really difficult to deal with, utilising that size, but putting the work in there as well. And, accompanying that size with some thought, it caused loads of problems. This is going to be something that other teams are going to have to take note of, both playing against Everton, but also from the other side of the coin in terms of taking on Arsenal, because for the goal, Tarkowski obviously destroyed Odegaard in the air quite comfortably, because you're always going to. It's a silly matchup. and it worked really well for Everton throughout the game, and Arsenal had no answers to it at all. The Everton defence against Arsenal's attack was always going to be a prominent theme in the game, and it certainly went down that corridor. And speaking of corridors, Everton used Dyched's strategy of forcing the opposition down corridors really, really well in the game, forcing Saka and Martinelli into wide areas due to that congestion. And the doubling up of the Everton fullbacks and wingers meant that there was no clear route to goal for the Gunners. They also were on Xhaka all the time, and the doubling up from Everton also made it increasingly difficult for the likes of Xhaka, Ben White and Zinchenko to make those overlapping runs out wide, which is something that has worked for them really well all season long. I also thought there was a real effort to keep an eye on both Partey, but also to stop that pass to Odegaard. Odegaard got taken off at the end of the game, but consistently, Onana in particular, was always looking over his shoulder to see that that passing lane from Thomas Partey to Odegaard wasn't available, and at the same time, Partey was put under pressure every single time he got the ball. It was really, really smart, and it closed off so much of the game from Arsenal's point of view. I think the biggest takeaway from this game, is how much the opposition's teams take from this game when they play against Arsenal. It's Brentford next for Arsenal, and with Brentford's track record against the big teams in terms of making it difficult for the opposition, if they follow this blueprint set by Sean Dyche, especially with the form and confidence that they've got, that's going to be a really tricky game for Arsenal to bounce back from. Arsenal fans, let me know how you're feeling. Are you worried? Is it all going to be fine? I mean, surely you're worried, but you're also confident. It's a tough time, isn't it? Let me know how you're feeling in the comments down below. Aston Villa 2, Leicester City 4. Great game, this one. 1.71 XG to 2.57, and have Leicester finally unlocked their potential with a couple of new signings here. It was a really exciting game, and a big part of that was due to how Leicester City set up. For ages, we've been saying how James Maddison on the right doesn't quite give Leicester City the balance that they need, both defensively and offensively. And whilst Leicester still conceded a few chances, the signing of Tete and the ability to now play a 4-2-3-1, it had a really positive impact on how Leicester performed this weekend. There were 3 Leicester debutants against Villa, and their presence gave Leicester a new look, but also a new approach, which is the crucial thing here, I think. The signing of Tete in particular, it now allows Maddison to play centrally and as close to the striker as possible. This is going to help in terms of his output. This allowed Harvey Barnes and Tete to make runs from out to in. You saw that with the goal for Tete, and because they knew there was someone who was going to be able to interlink the play with, that you also had Dewsbury Hall who's spraying around some lovely passes as well. Having Maddison in a central area also meant that Kelechi Iheanacho wasn't isolated, and he was able to pick up the ball and create chances, as well as being able to pick up some more space. And there was a really lovely partnership on the left-hand side with Harvey Barnes and Christensen, who made his debut as well. And this is a partnership that I think will flourish for the remainder of the season. They interchange play well together on the left, and now that Barnes has a quality left-back who can attack playing alongside him, it meant that he wasn't consistently running into trouble due to a lack of options. And if a team was going to double up on him, they had another threat sort of taking players away. You saw that again for Iheanacho's goal, I think, where Christensen points to where he wants the ball after playing an early pass to Harvey Barnes. He doesn't get the ball, but he takes defenders away. Defensively, there is still more to be desired from Leicester, but at least now they have an attacking shape that suits their squad, and it allows them to sort of focus on a specific style of play. And that's one of those where, yes, they did concede 2, but they scored 4, and that so everyone's happy because they've won the game. When it comes to Aston Villa, it was mistakes that cost them in this match. You know, usually Unai Emery's side scoring 2 goals means that they're going to come away as victors, but in this case, they shot themselves in the foot, and it meant that they weren't able to recover from it. They had 63% possession and waves of sustained pressure, but failed to convert it into meaningful chances. Villa had Ollie Watkins and Leon Bailey starting as the strike pairing, and only John Duran to call on in that position to come off the bench. This may be a worry if Ollie Watkins gets injured, because that leaves a lot of pressure on John Duran, especially after the sale of Danny Ings. Brentford are flying. Outrageous victory for them. Comfortable too. 3-0 victory against Southampton, who were so poor in this game. 2.15 to 0.66 XG. Defensive fragility are the 2 big words that spring to mind when we're talking about Southampton's performance, whilst Brentford were brilliant and their chance creation was superb as well. And we'll get round to that in a second. But let's start off with Southampton, because they allowed them to do this through a combination of mistakes and just a lack of resilience when defending. So this is a screenshot from just the 7th minute of the match, and I think it's just a big insight into what Southampton did so wrong in this game. Ivan Toney is allowed loads of time to play the ball over the top to Wissa for starters, and then secondly, the Southampton defenders are really square on. They aren't prepared for any kind of penetration in behind. Leave it. This gave Wissa time to bring it down, and then he should have scored. Brentford's first and third goal are a cause for concern for Southampton in a massive way, because both goals, Southampton made it so easy for the ball to be played into the box and did little to prevent balls coming into the box. So this is a screenshot from Brentford's third goal. Look at how much time Rico Henry's got. And secondly, look at the oncoming run of Jensen. At no point does Perrault get in front of him. It's these kind of defensive frailties that are going to get Southampton relegated this season. And if we go from this game, they look doomed, to be honest, despite all these new signings. And obviously it's going to take a little bit of time for those guys to bed in properly, but they've got to be so much better defensively. For Brentford, I thought they continued their stellar work. It's absolutely outrageous what they're doing this year. And it's something that, you know, as Brentford fans, you just got to enjoy it for as long as it continues. And who knows, because this is such a smart football club. They always seem to know something that we don't. The way they played in this game is the way that they've been playing all season, and they've really kind of created a style of their own. They countered well, they used space intelligently, and they varied their attacks in a way that made their attacking play multi-dimensional. Brentford are now unbeaten in their last 9 Premier League games. They head to the Emirates next, as I said. I think at home they've only lost once all season. Something's happening there. Brighton got over the line, didn't they, against Bournemouth? Brighton 1, Bournemouth 0, 2.5 XG to 1.18. And for a 1-0, there's a lot to unpack from this game. For starters, it was Undav's first Premier League start for Brighton. And despite looking smart on some occasions, he actually missed 3 big chances, which he should have scored in all honesty. But he wasn't the only debutant on the pitch. For Bournemouth, they had both Semenyo and Traore making their debuts alongside Ouattara making his second appearance for the club. This is something I feel is worth touching on, because the signings of these new dynamic players gave Bournemouth a completely new look, and they had a whole different approach in terms of how they play. With no target man this time, the movement of the forwards was always going to be different. They looked to utilise their speed in transitions. It's actually quite similar to what Scott Parker did when he was at Fulham, in which he brought in pace in January, and they looked to be a counter-attacking team that obviously defended deep. For Bournemouth, this very nearly worked out for Antoine Semenyo. He ran half the length of the pitch to be denied by a last-minute Estupinian block. And the use of Ahmed Traore was interesting as well. He was almost exclusively being used as a left winger for Sassuolo so far this season. But for Bournemouth, he took up the number 10 role and was given a free role to facilitate play. He did okay, but didn't really create as much as we can see from his heat map, which shows how little he was around the box, which of course is where you want to be, really. Dango Ouattara looks like he could be a key man in their survival hopes, though, with his role on the right-hand side. Against Brighton, he had a total of 4 shots and was a handful in more ways than you'd expect. The fact that he's only 5'10", it didn't stop him winning 7 of his 8 aerial duels, and that physicality in goal will definitely cause problems for defenders in the Premier League. Brighton were their regular, brilliant selves. I love how assured they are in their approach and how they always know that they're capable of scoring. That was the thing that I was concerned about when it came to Brighton, especially sort of before I watched the game. I was seeing that like time was going on and they weren't able to kind of break them down. I was wondering if they were able to deal with being the team that the opposition is concerned with, as opposed to some of the great victories that they've had recently. And then there's wins against Liverpool. There's been that bit more open space, I guess. They never seem to rush it, and it simply comes naturally to them at the moment in terms of winning football matches. Their approach in this game was to use the space given to them out wide and then hurl balls into the penalty area. And despite only scoring once from a cross, they could have scored 2 or 3 from these kind of scenarios with how often they forged quality chances. This win keeps them in 6th spot, and they now have a 4-point lead on Chelsea and a 5-point lead on Liverpool. The Champions League is not too far away for Brighton, and they have games in hand as well. They couldn't, could they? Man United 2, Palace 1, the XG 2.04 to 1.37. An absolute disgrace of a sending off. The referee, I don't know what the guy was doing throughout the game, to be honest, but the sending off in particular, especially when you go to VAR, just rubbish, just totally rubbish. And again, shows the impact of slow motion sometimes. Erik Ten Hag continues, though, to do a great job at United. And for 90% of this game, Man United had the game under complete control. And apart from a late flurry of Palace pressure because they were down to 10 men, the game never looked in doubt at all. Manchester United's movement was really something to enjoy in this match, and the screenshots here are just a snippet of what they did so well against Palace and have been doing so for most of the season. Bruno Fernandes picks up a loose ball. His first thought is to play it forward quickly. He only takes 3 touches and he switches it to Rashford. Meanwhile, both Fred and Weghorst make coinciding runs. Next, we see the effect that this has in the latter stage of the move, because with Fred moving towards the near post and Weghorst targeting the far post, it gives Palace a lot to do defensively. And because the ball's played so quickly into Rashford, and with the immediate runs of Fred and Weghorst, it opens up loads of space for Rashford on the far side, and it gives him different options of what to do with the ball. This is something that Ten Hag's side have been doing brilliantly all season long, and as they grow into themselves, it's almost becoming autonomous and like that sort of muscle memory that you have seen with some of the great performances of Arsenal this season, and probably why Chelsea, on the other hand, are the complete opposite right now. This means that their other players becoming more refined and they almost run like a machine. The second goal is a brilliant example of this. It's so well worked and they almost walk the ball into the back of the net. Let's talk about Bruno Fernandes, because I don't think he's really getting the praise that he deserves this season. I think he's really come on leaps and bounds, despite the numbers not being at that crazy level that they were a while back. He has been a constant, consistent, quality performer for Man United this season, and his stats reflect it. Against Palace, he made 4 key passes and strung the attack together brilliantly. His work rate is something that goes unnoticed, I think, a lot of the time as well, probably because of the antics around it at times, but he does. He works so hard. He's so tenacious, and the midfielder made 4 tackles in this game alone, and he constantly offers the same level of defensive effort as he does offensively, which is, I think, is a huge, huge strength that he has to his game. And now turning our attention over to Crystal Palace, I thought they did well considering the absentees that they had. No Zaha, no Anderson. It may not be the end of the world in mid-table clashes, but in these huge games, you need them more than ever. And Jordan Ayew on the right was absent for most of the game and offered very little by ways of attack. And I think Will Hughes as well also struggled with the pace of this game and the quality of the midfield runners on the opposing team. I think the positive for Palace is that they have Lokonga and Ahamada as well, who joined last week to come into the side. And I think they're going to create a lot of dynamism in this squad and make it a lot more exciting when it comes to that midfield in the second half of the season. I understand why Palace fans are a little bit concerned about it all, but I would just keep calm and carry on for now. I think Vieira knows what he's doing, and I think it's a talented squad. The final note from this match is that Casemiro now faces that 3-match ban after throttling Will Hughes, although of course he didn't really, did he? Like, if you watch it back like a few frames later, he's going, oh no, sorry, just let's all calm down. Like, come on. The likelihood is that McTominay is the one that's going to be looked to, but 17-year-old Kobbie Mainoo was on the bench for this one, and he's impressed a lot in the Carabao Cup this season, so he could be a player that gets a game and becomes a name in the near future. Right, let's talk about this monstrosity. Or this monster of Wolves. Wolves 3, Liverpool 0. 2.11 XG to 1.78 for Liverpool. Did Liverpool make a huge mistake this January? We spoke about it on the stream on deadline day. Like, should they have addressed these glaring deficiencies that seem to be getting worse and worse? I was thinking, surely it'll click. There'll be a moment it'll click. And maybe it will when some of these players come back. But it is so woeful right now. The idea, and I said this the other day, I was like, there's always a team that goes on a bit of a run when the pressure goes off. Maybe that'll be Liverpool. Maybe they can get top 4. But the way that they're playing, they are all over the place at the moment. And as I say, will Liverpool's failure to address the glaring deficiencies in their squad mean that they don't even finish in the top 7 this season? Because after watching this game, it looks like this may become a reality for Liverpool. There was a huge midfield mismatch for this one, with Wolves' midfield looking proactive, energetic and positive, whilst Liverpool's midfield is just uncertain. It's lacking so much. Firstly, you've got to highlight the average positions here, because we can see that Thiago is parallel with Tete. This means that the midfield is so lopsided, with Keita picking up a more positive position. This is something that could work at other teams, but the whole thought process of Liverpool in the past is that you have 2 8s that are high up the pitch to help the press. So with Thiago sitting deeper, it allows the opposition midfield more time on the ball, and to play those passes in behind that Liverpool hugely struggled to deal with against Wolves. Now, I know Thiago at times has dropped deep in previous seasons, but then you had Mane to kind of fill in that gap and offer up that work rate as well, or Luis Diaz as the season progressed as well. So missing those players is really hurting them as well right now. The freedom afforded to Ruben Neves in midfield was deadly for Liverpool as he controlled the tempo of the game, making 41 passes, 7 long balls, and created one big chance. Mario Lemina was awesome in this game. I got a couple of messages about how good he was, and so we're giving him his moment. Lemina, great start for you, son, if you are watching. I doubt you are. And Nunez also showed Liverpool what they were missing in terms of energy and application. Now, here is a scary stat for you. Wolves created, are you ready? 6 big chances, whilst Liverpool only created 1. This is the same Wolves side that scored less goals than any other team in the division. Wolves created 4 chances from counter-attacks, and Liverpool's lack of intensity allowed them to cut through them like a hot knife through mildly warm butter. It's just not good, is it? Liverpool fans, talk to me right now, because these are some deep-rooted problems that don't seem to be changing for Liverpool, and they may have to start playing a low block because they need to sort of get some form of confidence to sort of get off their knees at this moment in time. It's so bad. It's so bad, and they're just so open at the back at the moment. Liverpool did create some chances, though, but I hate to say it, Darwin Núñez couldn't put them away. You know, the Uruguayan had 2 good chances, and whilst he got both of them on target, that's the difference between elite strikers. He's going to have some purple patches, but they need to come a bit sooner because he gets into such wonderful positions, and I understand why fans like him because, you know, he is such an outlet. He does work so hard, but you just need him to take one of these to allow Liverpool to breathe again. Finally, we've got to talk about the centre-back pairing of Joe Gomez and Matip. It simply doesn't seem to work at the moment. Both of them are very error-prone and can be forced into errors easily, as we saw against Wolves. And in the Premier League, you get punished for these types of mistakes, and that was the case on Saturday. Hats off to Wolves, though, who looked like a side completely transformed under Lopetegui. But, I mean, I guess you're playing Liverpool at a good time, but still, what a huge result it is to be beating a team or a club like Liverpool 3-0, although some Liverpool fans might disagree with that. You know, they have they've really sort of dialed it up in terms of being a free-flowing, attacking style that they're starting to employ now when they go forward, and they are catering to the players that they have at the club. Their midfielders are so well-rounded, and they work together really well, which is something that I was a little bit concerned about, but they looked great in this one. And they may genuinely be one of the best 3 midfield threes outside of the top 6. Wolves fans, let me know how you're feeling after this one. Newcastle 1, West Ham 1, and the XG was 1.01 to 1.01. How funny is that, eh? When Newcastle put the ball into the back of the net twice in the first 5 minutes of this game, you feel like it's going to be a really long one for West Ham, but they massively proved us wrong and put in a really solid away performance that led to what I would say is a really good point for them. Although maybe at the start of this season, certainly at the start of last season, you wouldn't have said that. So let's start with Newcastle United. Newcastle now have 4 draws in their last 5 Premier League matches. They still only lost 1 match this season, but they've now drawn 10 out of 21 Premier League matches. And if you know, you know with this one, they firmly have one hand on the draw cup. Again, if you know, you know. If you don't, go listen to Jaff and go back to the start of the season and listen to them all. I think it's one of the first few. Anyway, is this a sign? I know, like, do I want to be right? I don't really care. But actually, you know, I like where Newcastle fans' heads are at right now. So I would love to see Newcastle get into the Champions League. But this does feel like a gentle sign of tensing up, or it's a case of were they sort of running a little bit hot prior to this set of draws. I think, again, the crucial thing is they don't concede many, you know. But they kind of need someone to sort of catch fire a little bit again because the games are going to be tough and they need to get consistent victories. That's the problem right at the top, is that you have to keep winning. Draws aren't enough, and that could allow another team to catch them up. Tactically, it was very similar to what we're used to from Newcastle. They didn't do much wrong, to be honest, and they created a few good chances with Anthony Gordon threading a great pass in behind to Callum Wilson, only for him to be tackled by Naif Aguerd, which was an unbelievable tackle, contended for tackle of the season, by the way. But if you're being really harsh, I think at home we've gotten to the point where we're starting to expect a little bit more from Newcastle nowadays, and with only 1.1 XG created and only 2 shots on target, I think we can definitely call this an off day from the high standards that they've set themselves recently. Look, Newcastle have to sort of nip this in the bud, though, and treat it as a one-off, or they're going to be in danger of tensing up, of going too far. Draws aren't defeats, and they just need to get a victory in that next game. Another slight worry for Newcastle may be the fact that they conceded from a corner here. That's only the fourth set piece that they've conceded from this season, and that is very uncharacteristic from them to concede such an easy goal, and has been what their success has been built upon. On West Ham, I thought they were extremely positive in their approach, and they deserved the point that they got. And with this being a really tough game on paper, I think West Ham could have been forgiven for adopting a more conservative approach going into it. But when they go forward, they did so with numbers. You can see so from this screenshot here. And it shows how many bodies that they were happy to commit when they did break into Newcastle's final third. So this, you can see, is kind of heat map alongside where his average position is. He's dropping deep, dropping deep, dropping deep. He's trying to then get into that. You see the splodge a little bit further up. He's trying to get into those areas, but they're not playing the pass.